Hi friends, it is Monday, new week, new start, and I'm really excited for this because I officially planned out what I'm going to be speaking on for the rest of this 30-day series, as well as probably continuing it, which is the goal, which is really what I want to do is just keep recording and allowing for myself to experiment while also staying true to whatever feels most important to speak on and share about. So for this week, I'm going to be focused on the topic of authenticity and personal storytelling. So every video throughout the week will somehow encompass those themes. And authenticity is something that it's a really core value for me. And I know that especially as a young adult, whether a teenager or in your 20s and 30s, that could seem like the hardest time to be authentic because there's so many changes and so many factors and so many pressures that it is difficult sometimes. So I definitely understand that. And for this episode, I really want to talk about my personal journey with authenticity and why I feel it's so important to just share on. And I think it's been a bit of a, I wouldn't say roller coaster, maybe more of a, kind of trying to flow with the tides with that, because there was a lot of moments where I knew that I wasn't being authentic. And that came purely from either fear or just the perspective or the perception that being myself was not going to be accepted. And the truth of that is, for me, in places and in situations and in relationships where I felt like I could not be authentic, that was a really strong indicator that those people and that environment just wasn't for me. Straight up. And sometimes we try to force our way into certain things because maybe we think that that's what we want, or maybe it seems from another, an outside perspective, like that's where you want to be. But with me, and I think, I feel like I experienced this in many different scenarios because I've always enjoyed exposing myself to different types of people and exposing myself to different groups and just people who have different hobbies and different, ways of thinking and different just beliefs. And for some people, when you grow up in a specific environment, you may be exposed to the same thing all the time, and you may not get out of that until you make the sovereign decision in yourself. Like one day you're just like, you know what, I want to explore something new, I need to see something new, I need to be someone new, all these things. And for me, I grew up moving a few times, so that kind of played a part in it, of literally having to start new schools. So whenever I would start a new school, it felt like, okay, now I gotta start again. Now I gotta introduce myself again. Now I gotta find friends again. Now I gotta acclimate to this specific neighborhood. So that came with a level of just naturally having to adapt. And yeah, at the same time, and I think I mentioned this in other videos, of like always being very interested in the arts and creativity, but also being very interested in sports and being active. And usually, like, if you would maybe, I don't know, if you reference like old like 80s movies where it was like the stereotypical groups of how people were divided, like you probably wouldn't associate like a jock with a drama major or something like that. And there were slight aspects of that, but I feel like I was still too young for it to be like a clear division in it. And then when I got to, I guess more, was it middle school? Yeah, I feel like in middle school, maybe that's where I kind of, yeah, middle school was an interesting time, because I think for me, and maybe you can relate to this if you're around my age, of like, yeah, middle school is just like an awkward set of years. And for context, the neighborhood where I grew up was pretty mixed, I would say. Like, there was different ethnicities of people, but it was predominantly Polish. And if you also grew up in New York, or maybe familiar with New York, the way it is, it's like everyone's kind of just thrown into the bunch. Like, everyone's like, there's no separation, right? And at the same time, there may be literal like tiny little neighborhoods where there may be more predominantly a certain ethnic group than another. So that's kind of how it was where I was at. But then my middle school was a little bit, it wasn't too far, but like literally just 10 minutes away, it's a different ethnic group, right? So it was placed kind of like, the way I saw it was like, it was placed in the middle between what can be considered like, I would say, majority Hispanic Latino communities, lower class, like literally like the projects were they right in front. And then on the other side, it was like Orthodox Hasidic Jews. And like you could literally walk maybe, I don't know, 5 blocks and it felt like you were in Israel. Like, it didn't even feel like you were in the US. And yeah, so it was there, but then also there was like in the school there was a mix of Hispanics, blacks, some Asians, and Polish people, because we were all like near each other, right? So I feel like that was when I went there, when I started school there, that was when I began to, I guess, experience more firsthand and really like, I guess, begin to see that not everybody, like not everyone was as open or was raised in a way to just see everybody the same. Because I moved so much, because I was always exposed to different types of people, like it didn't seem like a foreign concept to me, right? To literally be in like a melting pot. But what I noticed was that certain people that I was going to school with, like that was all they knew, right? Like even if it was that specific neighborhood, that was all they knew. So then going into middle school where it was a little bit more mixed, even though you are in what can be seen as like a melting pot city, it was yeah, it was just different and it was new. And you know, there were aspects of experiencing racism, I would say, but it wasn't like, I feel like for me, I never really took it personally. It was just kind of like it was what it was. And I think a lot of kids, they just didn't like, to them it wasn't anything out of the ordinary to like just make jokes. And like, you know, sometimes it was like, I really don't think it was from a bad place. It was just like, that's just what it was, you know. And I was kind of in like this in between groups and space, because where I lived was predominantly Polish people, but I'm a Latina girl, right? So that was like a little bit confusing, and they're like, you know, like, who's this white girl? But obviously I'm not, right? So it was really funny to me. It was really funny to me to experience that. And I think, yeah, because there were like, I don't even want to call it bullying, because it really, like, to me, it wasn't that bad. Like there was kids that were actually getting bullied that like, yeah, so I can't even call it bullying. I think it was just more so like pure observation, and some people just don't have filters, you know, and that's okay. Like looking back on it, yeah, it's kind of I can laugh about it now, but as I'm speaking, I didn't realize how much that part of my life impacted me, because while this was occurring, I was kind of also in that like mentality of having to compartmentalize, because that's what I was seeing other people do, right? It was like you were either on the sports team or you were the artist. You were either really smart or not so smart, you know. So it was kind of like there was associations with these types of people and types of characteristics. Or, you know, you could have been smart and an athlete too, like that's a thing, right? But it was just, there was no section for all of the above or none of the above type of thing. And I think that that's always been a thing for me, where I it never sat right with me. Especially even when they like ask you questions about like filling in, you know, to describe, like, no. No, I don't need to check the box. What is it now? It's like, I prefer not to answer. But anyways, yeah, so during those years, it was really like navigating that, and also I think it was just this deep desire to want to be accepted. And because I knew I was different, literally physically, and just the way that I approach things, even like the way I dress, like there was things about me that like I stood out, and I knew that. But at the time it was like I didn't want to stand out. I didn't want to stand out. I didn't even want any attention on me. And yeah, I think that also coincided with me purposely like kind of coming more into my shell, because there was just this level of discomfort with being myself, and thinking with some aspects of truth that I wouldn't be accepted if I was fully myself. And the thing was like at the same time, I feel like I was being myself. Like there was times where, yeah, I was quieter than most people, and it was simply because I didn't want to talk, or I didn't feel the need to talk. And there was other moments where, yeah, like I love dressing up. I've always loved like just having a different sense of style. And there was like times where I would either get kind of like called out or somewhat bullied for it, or I'd have people be like, your style is like awesome, like I love your outfits. So it was kind of like, you know, I feel like that's just a natural part of authenticity, is like understanding that there's always going to be people that will honor and be inspired by it, and then there's going to be people that are triggered and also just not in resonance with you as your true self. They just don't vibe with you, and that's okay. You know, that's okay too. And I know that there's people right now that don't vibe with my energy and don't vibe with how I act or how I talk and how I show up in the world, and that's okay. At the same time, like, I believe that we can still have respect for differences and agree to disagree. So leading into high school, with regards to authenticity in that case, so it was a little bit of a switch, because for high school, I spent like my entire summer of middle school building up a portfolio, working on my portfolio for the school. Like I had to audition for my school. My school was a visual and performing arts high school, and you can only be accepted by audition. So there was very few people in my middle school that were even thinking about going to a school where you needed to audition, because that just wasn't in like, they just weren't thinking about it, and or maybe they thought that they couldn't get in. So there was probably a handful of people from my middle school that were also kind of in that same headspace of like, I want to go to this school, or I'm going to audition, or I'm going to prepare to go to this school. And that in itself kind of, I think that narrowed down more of like people that were in resonance with me, right? And at the same time, so I got accepted. I was I was accepted into the visual arts program, and then I also got a call back for the drama program. And I feel like it actually worked out. This is kind of a side note, but I feel like this is important to say. So there was like multiple rounds for auditions, and like I think I had passed like the first two or something for drama, and then the last one I didn't make it, but like I almost did. And I was thinking about how if I would have had to choose, and at the time I really enjoyed acting, and even before that I was going to acting school and I was taking classes in it, and there was some part of my, I guess, 12-year-old self that wanted to be an actress. So that was a lot more present for me at the time. But I remember going to the audition, and there was like certain people that were with me in the waiting room, or in the hall. It was like we were in the hallway or something. And I was just observing everything. I was observing the people. I was observing, you know, the current students that were also like already in the program and that were helping with the selection process, and then like the teachers and just like the whole audition in general. And I just remember being in the, like, to wait for like the callback, and something just did not sit right with me about it. And then I realized that I got into the visual arts. So I was like, perfect, this is what I'm going for, right? And I had auditioned for other schools too that were like audition only, and I got into those. But like this was the school that I like, that was my top priority. Like, this is the school I want to go to. And side note, when I was like, I don't know, 8 years old, I had visited Lincoln Center for the first time. And my mom tells me this story all the time. We're like walking past there, and I see a school, like a big building. And I asked my mom, like, what is that? And she was like, oh, like, that's like a performing arts school. And literally me, no context, no idea, nothing, still in elementary, I'm like, I'm gonna go there. Turned out, several years later, I ended up going there. So anyways, yeah, when I get to school, to high school, it was a little bit different for me because everyone was artistic, everyone was creative, everyone like was so in their unique expression. Like everyone had different fashion styles, and it was really fun for me because I was like, oh my god, like these are my people. But what I realized was there was still a lot of clickiness, and there was still a lot of division, and it wasn't in the stereotypical way of like what I perceived high school to be, because I was getting my idea of like high school from like all these like 2000s and like 90s and 80s movies where like it was clear like division between groups. But with this, it was like, because it was specifically visual and performing arts, it wasn't divided necessarily by you being creative or not. It was more like by major. So like there was visual arts, dance, vocal, so like singing, instrumental, and technical theater, and drama. So it was really interesting to see how like these different groups kind of interacted with each other or didn't interact with each other. And it was like really, like I learned really fast like what the, I guess the like social hierarchy of the school was. And I was fortunate to like know a senior going into the school and having some friends that were that I met before. So they kind of like, yeah, I think they kind of prepared me a little bit mentally. But yeah, I think I didn't know who I wanted to show up as. Like, I didn't think that I still at that point, I didn't know that it was an option to fully be myself. I didn't, like, it didn't, first it didn't really feel safe, but then there was this other side of like, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was, so I was kind of just playing the game and seeing where I landed. And I think, like, which this is like a natural thing for anyone, it's like the main focus for me was like, I just need friends and I'm not trying to go through high school alone, you know? And I remember it was tough because I felt like I was hanging out with people like pretty soon, like probably within the first week, like it was like that. And it was like really big groups of people, and we would hang out, and like it was fun for me because I got to experience more of being in Manhattan versus Brooklyn. So like I got to like explore all these different parts of the city, and it was just exciting. And like I loved what I was learning in my school. But I just noticed how, I feel like I noticed people they were trying really hard, and it was also because I was trying really hard. So it was kind of like attracts like, and it was, yeah, like it didn't seem like anyone was really being authentic. And I feel like that's just normal, especially in high school. It's kind of like that's the last thing you think about, because it's really vulnerable to be authentic, because it's like if you're playing a persona, or if you're being this type of person, or if maybe it is part of you but you're kind of exaggerating or making that aspect of yourself like your entire personality, that's easier. Like if someone straight up tells you I don't like you, or judges you, or says something mean to you, or just, you know, doesn't accept you, then that's easier because it's not really you, right? There's this persona, so they're judging and perceiving the persona, so there's less attachment to it. And this was what like was going through me, right? So yeah, I think I was always perceived as quiet. I was always perceived as like chill, quiet girl. And part of that was because I genuinely did not vibe with certain people. I just didn't. And for me, it was easier to kind of just observe and than do anything otherwise. And also, I was around some people who had really big personalities. And part of that, which I can speak on that now, is because I can pick up on people's patterns, was a lot of these kids that had these really, you know, loud, overbearing personalities that like everyone needed to hear them, was most likely because they didn't feel that either at home, or yeah, it was just this level of needing to be heard and needing to be seen and needing to be validated. And I think for me it was the opposite of not necessarily needing to be validated, but more so just not wanting to be judged or not wanting to be perceived, period. So it was kind of like I did, in a way, make myself invisible, and it was on purpose, until maybe like junior year. And I'm not saying I didn't have friends. I had friends, guys. I wasn't like, I wasn't a friendless person. And, if anyone who's watching this, that we spent time together in high school and we were friends, I just want to say that in those moments, like, that was friendship to me. That's what I thought friendship was. And there's some people that genuinely made high school better, genuinely made the experience better. And I have so many just fun and funny memories with certain people that I will forever have so much gratitude for, because like those were moments where I really felt like I was just being a teenager and just being a bit reckless and just, navigating being a teenager. And I have a lot of like deep appreciation for that. So I just wanted to like make that clear, because it was never that, like, I don't think it wasn't anyone else. It was me. It was me that didn't feel safe to be myself and didn't feel safe to be fully seen. So that's just how I navigated the world. And part of me had some, I would say, some like sadness and just grief around how different it could have been if I was just myself fully and didn't like pretend around certain people or didn't put up with certain shit that I really didn't have to, so yeah, at the same time, it's like I wouldn't have had it any other way. Because a lot of these experiences has led me to this moment right now. And I think everything that happens, especially when you're on a journey of authenticity, like, everything is a blessing and a lesson. Everything is a blessing and a lesson. And that's the best gift. That's the best gift that you can give yourself. Because I could easily have been upset or stayed in this kind of victim mentality, or just like be like, oh, like they were bullying me, or they weren't nice to me, or like, oh, they didn't accept me. Like, I could have stayed in that and not speak my truth and not be myself because of that. But the truth is, it's like, who cares? What matters at the end of the day is that you accept yourself, is that you love yourself, is that you think you're fucking cool and awesome and you want to be around you, because you can't escape you. You're with you all the time, right? And being authentic isn't something that you can just brand and say that you're an expert in because it's a trending keyword. Being authentic is something that is felt. Being authentic is something that is, in a way, learned, because you had to experience many, many moments where you weren't authentic. You had to be in many, many situations where you had to question your authenticity in order to be authentic. Unless you're Jesus, which he's the prime example, because he was rooted and he stayed in it and was unshakable in that, and straight out the womb he was authentic, right? But for us muggles, there's certain parts of our lives where our authenticity becomes dimmed, or we get scared to show ourselves because something along the way happened where being our authentic self was criticized, ridiculed, or just didn't feel safe to do. And the thing is, it's like all of that happens for a greater purpose, but it's what you choose to do with it. Because the same people that get bullied can also become a bully. The same people who get hurt can also be the ones who cause hurt. So you always have a choice. And I had the choice many times to just really, really play into a persona that I knew people were fascinated by, or maybe more digestible or more appealing. But in that, I felt like I was betraying myself. I felt uncomfortable in my own body because I felt fake and like a fraud. So if you're watching this, I know what it's like. I know what it's like, and honey, I can see it so clearly in people. And that's another reason why some of my friends from the past kind of just dissipated. And I don't think it was something that was conscious. Or you know what? Let me not say that. Let me say friends. Because there was some relationships where really it was very one-sided and or just not the healthiest, right? And being authentic comes with a lot of loss. And I've experienced that loss. And in this, right, tying this back to authenticity and personal storytelling, because this is the topic, right? Tying this all back, it's that being authentic doesn't mean that you're going to be perfect. Authenticity does not equal perfection. Authenticity does not equal perfection. It does, however, in my eyes, equal freedom. Because when you can be fully yourself, like, that is what we call, like, God, right? Like, God just is. God isn't trying to be you or someone else. In a way, God is us, right? God is us. God is expressing himself through us. But he's not deeming you or I better or worse than each other, because we are all him, right? So when you own who you are as an individual, excuse me. When you own who you are as an individual, when you embrace who you are in this specific lifetime, in this specific body, in this specific blueprint of your DNA, like you are encoded to the bone, you are encoded to the atom, right? To see and function and behave and look a certain way, right? When you embrace that, that's freedom. And part of that, part of embracing that is your personal story, is being real with what you went through to be where you are today. And in me owning up to that and sharing this with you guys, there are still some things I have not shared with you. And the thing is that doesn't take away from me showing up authentically. That for me is allowing myself to be with my own story, or actually deciding what story I want to tell. What is my story? Because there can be multiple stories in one, but what is the story that I want to tell, right? So sometimes that takes a little bit of time to really sit with and anchor in, right? But that doesn't make it less authentic. So, parting words for y'all. Your journey of authenticity starts in the story. It starts in the story. And it doesn't mean that you have to be sharing like I am, but it could be you just having a simple interaction with a stranger or someone in your physical life, and you just being real about something. Like, that's really it. Just being real. And the more that we can do that, the more that we create as a collective, as a group, as a whole, that we nurture and create this space to be in our full authenticity, and to know that it is okay for us to be different. It is okay for us to be different. Thank you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.